son of the arts in Italy for the blessing of the Dr. Bethune statue that is now on its way to the United States Capitol, as our beloved historian Fred Hearns has said. It's the state of Florida that will have the first African American representing any state in the country in the National Statuary Hall collection. Now, at the U.S. Capitol, we do have the statues of Reverend Martin Luther King. There's a statue, a beautiful statue of Rosa Parks, but they're not part of the state collection. Isn't that mind-blowing? There's no African American. So how did this happen? How did it come to the state of Florida and Dr. Bethune are the first? Well, I remember being elected to Congress in 2006 as a newbie, and you take a lot of folks from home on tours, and you say, oh, every state has two statues that represents the state. Who represents the state of Florida? Okay, John Gorey. We already cheered the air conditioning with John Gorey. But then Florida, I was just shocked to learn that we were also represented by a very obscure Confederate general. A Confederate general, yes, he was born in Florida, but he didn't really live much of his life here. He was the last general in the Confederacy to surrender to Union forces. Then he fled to Mexico. So he was a traitor, and he that's not us. That's not a person who should represent this beautiful, diverse state. So we had kind of tried to instigate a change and made some suggestions. 2008, 2009. But it wasn't until the horrendous massacre at Mother Emanuel in Charleston, South Carolina, where communities, states were re-examining their symbols and their statues, that it caught fire. I led a bipartisan congressional delegation letter to the Florida legislature and said it's time for the state of Florida now to replace its statue. It has to come from the state. The state has to make the move to replace the statue. And surprisingly, and here are some other folks that we can thank along the way. Speaker of the House at that time was Speaker Krista Bewley. He said, okay, and he assigned it to state legislature Republican. You have to get, it has to be bipartisan in Florida right now. State legislator Pepe Diaz out of Miami-Dade, and Edna Rain from here in Tampa carried that bill. Senator Perry Thurston from the East Coast carried it in the Senate. The first step was to say, okay, we're willing to replace the statue. And that wasn't easy. There was a lot of opposition in the legislature. But eventually that was passed. And what happened then, and CJ and Fred, you'll be very interested in this. The Department of State, and there's a Division of Historical Resources, they said, okay, well, let's see who Floridians want to replace this Confederate general. Who is a great Floridian? They didn't publicize it very much, but they did an online survey. Well, I've been following this along the way. Our friends at Bethune-Cookman have been following it. We made sure they were. Doris Weatherford, the renowned historian here in Tampa, who's written books on women in history. She really helped put together a biographical sketch, and she organized the historians to weigh in on the online survey. So we kind of took it over. If they had publicized it, I don't know. I think Dr. Bethune would have come out on top. But it just shows. I think she'd be proud that we organized, that we were focused, and that really her legacy spoke for itself. But in that online survey, she was far and away the top vote getter, because there was some interest. But you know who else was right behind her? James Weldon Johnson, Harry T. Moore, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, George Jenkins. Now, what did George Jenkins do?
Public.
He founded the Public Supermarket. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a contingent in Lakeland that were there advocating for George Jenkins. But Dr. Bethune, far and away, had the most votes. So it was clear, the legislature, because there were members there who thought Marjorie Stoneman Douglas would be appropriate, and there was this George Jenkins movement. But they just simply couldn't deny that Floridians had spoken through this online survey. And when you examine her legacy, what she meant, I mean, the arc of the human rights movement and the civil rights movement in America, she planted the seeds. The daughter of slaves who understood and her family understood the value of education. What was she? She was almost the youngest out of 16? 17 children in that family. And she knew education unlocked the keys. That was the key that unlocked the future. But she really planted the seed in all that she did in working for women's rights, for civil rights, knitting together the African American women's organizations all across the country. She was a Delta, I think, right? She knew that political power came from bringing people together. So yes, she was the first in the Black Cabinet. She was the first to, attended the founding of the United Nations, the only African American woman there. But really the arc of her life, she was there before Dr. Martin Luther King began to preach, before Rosa Parks refused to stand on the bus, before my beloved late colleague John Lewis marched for voting rights. She was the one that provided that foundation for progress. So this ceremony was the culmination after the legislature again had to come back and pass a bill to name her as our great Floridian for the U.S. Capitol. They did a search for artists, and there were about 1,000 artists across the country and here in the state of Florida that offered up a chance to sculpt this statue. The winner, far and away, was this artist, this sculptor, Nilda Comas, who is originally from Puerto Rico. She lives half of her time in Fort Lauderdale and half of her time in Pietrasanta. She is a famous sculptor in her own right, but she will be the first Hispanic woman to have a sculpture in this country. So again, Dr. Bethune will love that. I brought Nilda to the U.S. Capitol to meet with the architect of the Capitol. We toured all of the statues in the Capitol. We went over to the Library of Congress, and Ursula, you'll love this, where a woman, a researcher over at the Library of Congress, whose name is Dr. Moses, put together all of the research. CJ, you can come, and Fred, you can come up and you can look at all these materials. They even put together videos and radio programs with Dr. Bethune. And you all, I'm inviting you all to the U.S. Capitol for this ceremony where we can listen to these recordings as well. Nilda did her research. She likes to, before she sculpts a statue, really know the person, if possible, that she's going to sculpt. And she did so well. Isn't it beautiful that this is going to be the first educator, the first symbol of an educator with a robe or with the cap and gown. But Nilda organized a program in Pietrasanta that was second to none. We did the stone, the marble for the statue comes from the same quarry in Italy where Michelangelo took the marble to sculpt the David that is in Florence, and Pieta two of the most renowned, famous statues in human history. Dr. Bethune's mark comes from the same quarry. They took us to the quarry last 1 week ago. We were in Michelangelo's quarry. They took us inside the cave, and the musicians from Bethune-Cookman University, these recent graduates, stood in the middle of this cave and sang the alma mater for Bethune-Cookman University. Now, Davina said that this you watched online.
Yeah.
What did you think?
It was mind-blowing to hear that anthem with the echo and the acoustics and the lyrics of the anthem. Perhaps we'll close with it today as well. But it was just mind-blowing to hear that and to just feel the vibration and the energy of Dr. Bethune in that space.
There was not a dry eye. I'm so glad you got to watch it. They did this on Facebook, so you can. I think you can go back and watch it and watch it. But the next day we had the blessing in the town square with the mayor and Dr. Hiram Powell, the president, the current president of the Bethune-Cookman University, the mayor of Daytona Beach, the sculptor Nancy Lohman, who did. Thank you for recognizing Nancy. She's been quite a force in raising the funds. But here's the other kicker that I shared with Mayor Jane. Most states fund their statues. They pay for their statues every step of the way. This is a citizen-funded effort. The state of Florida said they really say good luck. We agree that Dr. Bethune will be our great Floridian. Joyce Cusack, who is a state representative who had represented Daytona for a long time and is on the board that has organized this effort. When Nancy Lohman told me the story that a couple of weeks ago when they reported that they had raised the hundreds of thousands of dollars needed to do all this, Representative Cusack said, well, I guess we should then. Because there was something to this that where the state didn't step up and did it, but the people of Daytona Beach and the Bethune-Cookman alumni and the students and all of them did this. I just want you all to know that part of the story because now it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that as her statue comes to the U.S., it's going to come to Daytona Beach, and they're going to display the actual statue, and then there is a bronze replica that is going to be installed on the river there in Daytona and Ormond Beach for time immemorial. It will be there. And she will be in the United States Capitol representing the state of Florida for time immemorial. Two more quick things on this. Two other things have happened this week that I think we can point back to Dr. Bethune's life and legacy and give us inspiration to go forward. You know, how she devoted her life to education and young people. Well, just yesterday, the new child tax credit, the tax cut for families with children, started to arrive in families' pocketbooks. I'm sorry the kids had to go here because that's what it's about. If you haven't heard about this, this is one of the most impactful things that Congress, in partnership with President Biden, has done. Here in Tampa, in this congressional district, 83% of families with children are going to have started to receive $250 a month per child. $300 if you have a young child. We anticipate that this will lift thousands of children in this community and all across the country out of poverty. This is something akin to what she worked for all of her life. This is Social Security for kids. This is not a big tax cut for the wealthiest among us. This is for families to help them buy diapers, put food on the table, not live in poverty anymore. How proud she would be of that. Also, this week, we got word that in working in partnership with the Tampa Housing Authority, we have in the budget for this year, in the appropriations bill that we'll vote on next week, $500,000 to connect families that live in affordable housing here at Tampa Housing Authority in West River and Encore with high-speed internet.
Nice.
Everyone with the Housing Authority that worked on this, that suggested that this was worth doing. What would we have done without being online over the last year during COVID? This is how you see the doctor now in many cases, right? This is how you work. This is how you train. So this is really exciting news. It's called the Housing Authority, Jerome, you all called it Connectivity for Prosperity. And I'm hopeful that it passes in the House and the Senate gets to work and we bring this home and we can continue to build on